I said, well, this thing wasn't recording. Ryan was harassing me for being gay.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first inaugural episode of the Let's Trade Places podcast. My name is Ryan Little. This is Parker Newman.
Hey guys.
The premise of this podcast is for two people to alternate between each other, discussing a topic in depth. And
Mhm.
hopefully, if things go well, and they will go well, and we will be famous,
Yes, yes, yes.
is you get two great podcasts for the price of one. Now, if we don't
Mhm.
do well, you'll get two douchebags for the price of one. And speaking
That's all
of
the internet is now. So,
speaking of two douchebags, the first episode I want to talk about two illustrious figures in history. Both were born in Southern California, 75 years apart, in poverty. Both were ambitious men, willing to do anything it took to reach the top of the ladder. And once they reached the top of their ladder, their character flaws exposed them, and they got canceled right at the top of their game. The first one is 37th President of the United States, Richard Nixon, who was blown up
right.
and canceled during the Watergate scandal. And the other one, equally illustrious, equally as powerful, is YouTuber Shane Yaw, otherwise known as Shane Dawson. Uh,
Government name.
I'm going to explain how Shane Dawson is the Richard Nixon of YouTube. I want to preface this by saying that this was post hoc. So I was thinking in my head, who is the Richard Nixon of X? Who is somebody who got canceled in a huge scandal, not really having to do with the scandal itself, but other things preceding it.
Mhm.
Because Richard Nixon's a very fascinating person, and I was thinking like, okay, what are YouTubers that have been canceled? H3H3, Jeffree Star, James Charles popped into my mind a bit because he got threatened and canceled. We're gonna talk about James Charles later, but Shane Dawson was the one that popped into my head because one, I was a fan during his peak period in like 2018,
Mhm.
2019. And he was making like 50 million views a pop. He was one of the biggest YouTubers. And then he got canceled, and I checked his YouTube account like before we started calling, and they barely crack a million views nowadays. He's been thoroughly destroyed.
I was just about to say, I was never on the Shane Dawson hype train back when he was popular, and I'm not that much younger than you, so I'm really
Mm-hmm.
surprised that I wasn't.
You weren't in the bi sister drama when you're like the perfect person to be in the bi sister drama.
I know, right? But no, I remember being in eighth grade when Bi Sisters happened. Or seventh. Was it seventh? Whatever. Anyways, I just wasn't a part of it, and so now I'm really excited to hear about how you drew this connection between these two.
All right. So before we get to the big scandal, equally as important, drama getting to and Watergate. I wanted to like do some like preliminary connections between these two figures, not the connections that were made before the my intro or after my intro.
Mhm.
So like Shane Dawson, when he was popping up as a YouTuber in like 2008, 2009, one of the big things about his channel was that he wanted to be like this controversial sketch comedian.
Hmm.
He wanted to do anything and everything in order to like make it towards the top of the YouTube chain. And so this was the late 2000s where like free speech was like the big thing, and so when it came to his comedy
It's not
sketches,
anymore, is it? Back when it was
eh,
the big thing, it's not anymore.
yeah, not on Twitter. Anything that's not Twitter, that's what it is. I caught myself there, and so like Jane Dawson would do all these types of sketches where he would be in blackface, where he would be in drag. You didn't hear about the blackface? That was like the big thing.
No.
Oh shit. We're gonna talk about the blackface later. Homophobic slurs, the R slur, slurs we can't say for us to be monetized. Fingers crossed. he was just kind of relentless in this edgy comedy in order to become one of the most popular YouTubers. And he eventually became one of the most popular YouTubers very quickly. He was like, in 2009, he was like among the top 10 most popular YouTubers. He was one of the first to get 1 million subscribers behind
Dang, okay.
juggernauts. Like, do you remember Fred? It's Fred! Like the Fred movies?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because Nickelodeon did movies with him. And John
Yeah.
Cena was in one, wasn't he?
He
That's
was
the
he
only, that's
was
all I
the
know.
he was the dad in the three movies. He was like the
Okay.
imagined dad, and you got to remember the Fred lore, the Lucas Cruikshanks Fred
Oh,
lore.
no, the Fred lore.
He was the first
That's
YouTuber
what
to
you're
make it
explaining to me.
to a million subscribers. And then
Mm,
19 and so Nixon's political career kind of began in a similar way. So both were born in Southern California. Both were grew up poor in Southern California. Richard Nixon in particular, he both of them kind of had this resentment towards this fact. Like there's this overlying insecurity with both Shane Dawson and Richard Nixon that you see throughout their careers. Like for example, when Shane
right.
Dawson started around 2008, 2009, he started right after he'd lost like 250 pounds. He was like morbidly obese right after he graduated high school in '06.
Hmm.
And so he started with these like body image issues. And then Nixon, when it came to Nixon, he was always Richard Nixon was always skinny, but there was this his big insecurity came from the fact that when he was being accepted into college, he was like this brilliant student, second in his class. He got scholarships to both Harvard and Yale, but his family couldn't find the means to drive him to Harvard or Yale. And so he had to go to the
Mm,
local liberal arts college for his undergrad degree. And so that just
okay.
cemented like this resentment towards like New England liberal elite types. And so that was sort of they sort of both had this insecurity, and it kind of permeated itself through Richard Nixon's early political career when he was invited by local Republicans in '46 to run against this big time New Deal Democrat. Richard Nixon just got out of the army. It was right after World War II. And the way that Nixon wanted to take down this popular incumbent Democrat was to call him a communist. Communist,
Mm,
communist, communist. And the way he did that is that he held up, during one of the debates, he held up this like sheet of like a union that he supported where one of the or a few of the members might have had communist ties. And it's like, waha, this guy is soft on communism, big on big government.
ooh,
And this was
uh-oh.
a congressional district that had a lot of people moving in, a lot of conservative type people moving in that were like hard work makes the dream work. And so that was the way that Nixon won that campaign. It was through this dirty tricks campaign. And so Shane Dawson through his edgy YouTube style skits, and then Richard Nixon through his like it was called Dirty Tricks campaign is how
Hmm.
that's a connection made there, both sourced from their
Okay.
insecurities. You understand what I'm saying?
I do. I'm getting the picture.
However, both of these things would come to haunt them even early on in their careers. And so like Richard Nixon slowly rose up the political ladder. He won uh his house seat in 1946. He won it again in 48. He became a US senator in 1950, and he basically did it by accusing the person that was running against him that she was soft on communism. And he did it
Mm.
even harder this time. And then Shane Dawson, you know, he kept doing those like edgy sketches. That's where like the blackface comes in. He did
Mm.
blackface like dozens of times. Just
And this is really concerning to hear.
insane.
I know this.
Believe it or not, Shane Dawson would later be seen as like one of the nicest people on YouTube. That's where like the empath meme comes from. 10 years later, he
Oh,
was the
actually?
yes. He would
No
be. He
way.
would. That's not just a meme. People genuinely thought that Shane Dawson was this empath, a man that would resurrect the canceled YouTuber back into relevancy.
Oh my God.
How do you not know? Whatever.
I wasn't on this side of the internet.
And I was. All right, and then 1952 rolls around, and Dwight Eisenhower, in order to win California, brings Richard Nixon in as VP. He does this mostly because Earl Warren, who was like the governor of California at the time, who was also a Republican, he had presidential ambitions. He was kind of similar to Eisenhower in the sense that he believed that he was above politics. He was like this moderate
Mhm.
non-ideologue. People he was called a rhino even back then, Republican in name only. And so like that's how he casted Earl Warren in order to keep him kind of blocked in and earn the good graces of the Eisenhower campaign. And that's how he became the vice presidential nominee in 1952. However, there was a controversy in 1952 where supposedly donors to the Nixon vice presidential campaign they donated to Richard Nixon. It was like $18,000 or so, and it was supposedly used as like a slush fund where you know what a slush fund
Hmm.
is, like a fund to do whatever you want, personal gain and whatnot.
Yeah.
This is one of the few things that Richard Nixon did not do, but he was getting heat from it. He was being attacked on all sides. Republican advisors, those East Coast Ivy League elites, they wanted to get him, and so they surrounded him on TV in 1952. Richard Nixon in front of this was one of the first live political announcements on television. 6 million people watched it concurrently. He gave this
Yes, I know
speech,
about this.
The checker speech. Yes, he sat
Hmm.
down. He laid down all his finances like it was a Caleb Hammer video. He was like, "I only have a sedan. My wife, she does not wear a mink coat, but she does wear a fine Republican gown, and I tell her all the time that she looks amazing in it. And I did receive one gift. It was a dog named Checkers that the kids named Checkers. And golly, we were gonna keep that dog. We're gonna keep it no matter what. It was very saccharine.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Shane Dawson, running from his controversies, every couple years he would say, "Sorry, I didn't do it." Well, he did do it. He did admit to doing it, but he was like, "Sorry, I didn't mean anything by it. I'm not a racist. Sorry." I think the first one was like in 2010, if that tells you anything.
All
People
right.
did not like his
And
blackface even back then, or his edgy jokes. Another aspect to Shane Dawson's later cancellation is that he made a lot of like pedophilic aligned jokes, and the average age of a Shane Dawson fan was like 12, and he would talk
yeah.
about like how sexy his fans were and shit like that.
Oh,
There was one
okay.
girl at like VidCon. I think Shane was barred from one of the earliest VidCons in like 2013 or so. Where a 12 or 13-year-old fan went up to Shane Dawson and was like, can my first kiss be you?" And Shane Dawson was like, "Yeah."
I was not expecting this to be the direction this first episode went. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
This is a controversial figure. Keep in mind, Shane Dawson was like at the very least 22 at this time. He is older than either me or you when he's doing these when he was doing these shenanigans. Anyways, third similarity before we get to the big one. 1960 and 1962. The big campaign. And then for Shane Dawson's side, we're going to talk about 2014's Not Cool. Have you heard of that movie? It's a
Not cool. No, I have not.
All right. This is
That's the whole premise of this podcast. I'm not
yeah.
supposed to know what you're talking about.
All right. Well, buckle up. This is a big one. So 1960 and 1962. Richard Nixon is rising up in fame. Richard Nixon kind of took over for Dwight Eisenhower at times because Dwight Eisenhower had occasional heart attacks. And well, one of the big ones was in 1955, and he became president. He was essentially de facto president for a few weeks. And so like he was kind of
Hmm.
a shoe-in for the 1960 RNC nomination. And so after he won the nomination, he went up against the one, the only John Fitzgerald Kennedy. John Fitzgerald
Oh.
Kennedy, JFK, was everything that Nixon wasn't. Kennedy was Ivy League educated. He was rich. His
He was
daddy was
sexy.
rich. Hey, there are some good looking Richard Nixon photos out there. Not in 1960
I will be
though.
doing my research after we're done with this.
All right. I'm the straight one, so I can't really. But I'm just saying that there are some decent looking Nixon photos out there. JFK was good with women. Nixon was barely able to get married. Okay, Pat did like him eventually, but women would swoon after JFK. Nixon would have
Mhm.
to pursue and gradually. It was a long courtship between him and Pat Nixon. That's all I'm saying. But she was pretty.
Okay.
He did score. I will say, not to be not to treat women as objects or anything. Got to cover all my
That's fine. I
bases.
just said that JFK was sexy. So, like,
But that's like objective fact.
is it? I've seen Discourse.
Really,
I have.
discourse or
Yes. People think that he's not actually that good looking. It's all JFK Jr. now. That's what
really?
people are in on.
Oh,
Yes.
is it like Biden and Hunter Biden?
It is kind of that vibe, yeah. And I
Okay.
literally have a People magazine back there with JFK Jr.'s face on it. I could go get
Yeah,
it.
but I'm just saying, in many ways, there was like a scene in Mad Men where like Don Draper is like, Nixon came from nothing. When I think of JFK, when I think of Kennedy, I think of like wealth and a silver spoon. But when I think of Nixon, I think
Hmm.
of myself. That was sort of the vibe of the 1960 election. And it was close. Republicans were successful in the 50s. They won by massive landslides. And Nixon was a good orator, despite like his lack of overt charisma. He was a good orator. He was able to keep the campaign going. It kind of shrunk a little bit with the presidential debates because, get this, Kennedy is actually a decent debater himself. Add that with like the
Hmm.
absolute, he mogged, right? Kennedy mogged Nixon. This is common knowledge, common ball knowledge.
Unfortunately.
One of the big things that turned the election, however, was MLK, Martin Luther King Jr., being arrested in 1960 while marching for civil rights.
Oh,
So
all right.
MLK and his father, MLK Sr., both of them were Republicans at the time. They voted
Hmm.
Republican in 56. Um, MLK was actually impressed by Nixon as vice president because Nixon allowed various civil rights legislation to go through against the Southern Bloc of Congress. Nixon, for all
Oh.
his. Okay, we'll get into Nixon's racism later, but at that time, like, MLK was thoroughly impressed by Richard Nixon. At least he was surprised by Richard Nixon. So when he got arrested, he was friends
All
with
right.
Nixon. When he got arrested, Nixon weighed the political calculus, realized we need more white people to support us, because back then, even in 1960, the South still mostly voted Democratic, and so he did not respond to MLK. And
Hmm.
then, but however, at the request of RFK, Robert Kennedy, JFK called Martin Luther King's wife and promised that they would get through this together. And that won Kennedy much more of the black vote. And at that moment, like the Martin Luther King family, they abandoned the Republican Party, and that might have been what turned the election over to Kennedy. Now let's go to Shane Dawson. In
Yeah, we're
2014,
just back and forth. This is
this
great.
we're
This, I'm
going
getting whiplash right
we're
now.
going back at two equally important things.
Yes. Yes. They both weigh the same amount. Okay.
In 2014, not Richard Nixon. In 2014, Shane Dawson was approached by this reality TV show called The Chair. And the premise of this reality TV show was that two novice filmmakers. So, one thing about Shane Dawson that I forgot to mention is that he wanted to use YouTube as a means to become a mainstream filmmaker. And so,
Dang, if
like,
only he didn't get canceled, because
if,
that's like the meta now.
yeah, he could have been the next Curry Barker.
Could have made Backrooms.
he could have made,
Shane Dawson could have directed Backrooms.
Lord help us if he could. Anyways, Shane Dawson approached by this reality TV show, and they had the same script, same budget, filmed in the same location, and it was two films. One of them was called Holidaysburg. I forget who directed it, and then the other was later titled Not Cool by Shane Dawson. Basic premise is that like a group of friends, they meet together and for Thanksgiving and they become their old selves. That's kind of the basic plot. Shane Dawson took it and was like, "What if I added all my routine edgy comedy that all my fans love? What if I just like rewrote the script
Mm.
with all my edgy comedy? What if I protested to get a writing credit? What if I pissed off everybody around me and bitched about it on during meetings?" And so at one point, the two producers of the reality TV show eventually endorsed the other film, Holidaysburg, because it was like okay. It was seen as like an okay to good movie. Whereas Not
Right.
Cool, according to the New York Times, they said something
It was
along.
not cool.
It was not cool. They said something along the effect of everybody who is involved in this film should be ashamed of themselves and never work in Hollywood again. So,
Ooh, that's rough.
however, because the voting on which was the better film, and they won, and if you won the contest, you won like $250,000. It was dependent on
Damn.
like popularity. And guess what? The guy with 10 million subscribers won the contest. 40, but
Who would have thought?
it was done on SurveyMonkey, and get this, 40% of people, they threw out 40% of the ballots because they did not watch both movies. It was seen that they did not watch both movies. So that should tell you how this contest sort of went. So it was kind of a, there was like
Yeah.
one YouTuber I watched where they said like, "Oh, he got blacklisted from Hollywood, no doubt. He was never going to be a Hollywood filmmaker after this." So we're going to go back to Richard Nixon, 1962. He was approached by the California Republican Party, and he was like, "Okay, guys, come on, Nixon, you were beaten by the best. There's no shame in being beaten by the best. If you want your presidential career to keep going, why don't you run for governor?" Right? 1962. And he was going up against this little known figure named Pat Brown, father of four-term Governor Jerry Brown. And the big thing with this campaign was that Richard Nixon's dirty tricks came to bite him in the ass. So Earl Warren, remember him? He was like,
Hmm.
"Oh, I'm gonna endorse but not endorse Pat Brown. So I'm gonna get like my son to campaign with him, but I'm still a Republican and I'm above politics. But Richard Nixon is an asshole, so I'm gonna campaign with him." And the big theme of this campaign was that Richard Nixon is just trying to become president. He's an asshole just trying to become president. And Nixon tried to pull out the usual, "Oh, he's a pinko commie." That didn't stick this time. He lost 51 to like 47. And at a
Oof.
press conference the following day or the later that day, Richard Nixon was like, "You won't have old Nixon to kick around anymore." And I assume that was what Shane Dawson must have felt in 2014 after he was basically blacklisted from Hollywood for being an asshole making one of the worst movies of all time. And so both
Hmm.
both illustrious figures of equal stature, mind you,
Uh-huh.
they entered this wilderness period where they didn't have like anything huge going on. Now Shane Dawson, there is something to say about Shane Dawson. I will give him praise for this. Shane Dawson has an amazing work ethic. He is willing to do anything. There's two skills that I think are applicable to both like online influencers and especially YouTubers and politicians, and that is like being able to adapt to the times, the changing.
Mm.
You have to be able to both be authentic and also be able to change wherever the wind goes. So like with Shane Dawson, when daily vlogs became popular because of like Casey Neistat, he did daily vlogs. When mukbangs and eating weird foods became popular via like Good Mythical Morning, he ate weird foods. When conspiracy theories popped up, he did conspiracy theory videos, and that was a huge hit.
Yeah.
When
See, I
YouTube,
do know about the Shane Dawson conspiracy theories.
yes. And then also, whenever, what was I thinking? When all the YouTubers were writing books in the mid 2010s, Shane Dawson also wrote books. I think he wrote
Right.
two. It was like I Hate My Selfie and It Gets Worse. It was like a collection of 12 essays by the Shane Dawson. Nixon was kind of doing the same thing as well. So Nixon was very famous when it came to Republican circles of not being far right, but also not being soft on communism. He was seen as like this middle path within the Republican Party. So like the hard right of the Republican Party was consisted of like, in Southern California at least, it was consisted of like Klan members, the John Birch. Have you heard of the John Birch Society? Just like
Hmm.
these far right crappy figures. And so like Richard Nixon would attack hard on people with when it came to like communist ties, even if they weren't real. And he would even admit that they weren't real. But he also was like, okay, I'm not going to be those people. Those people are insane. They're nutcases. I don't need their votes. And so he did things like in his 1946 campaign, he was able to defend like certain local black figures and nominally support various civil rights legislations. And he was able to earn a membership to the NAACP of his local NAACP branch in
All
1946.
right.
And this was, I mean, one could be cynical, and I'm slightly cynical as to whether those feelings were genuine, whether it was
Mhm.
just for political points, but it was like no small feat to do that. Right. This was a time period of open segregation. Southern California, I mean, the LA area was probably one of the most racist areas of the country that wasn't like Birmingham, Alabama. Like this was the
Yeah.
same place where like the 91 riots happened, right? Where Rodney King was like beaten to a pulp like 50 years later. So this was no small. While Richard Nixon would later like abandon black people as part of his coalition later, he was able to move with the times. And so was Shane Dawson. That was another similarity between these two figures. And Richard Nixon also wrote a book during a period when writing books for politicians became popular. You see, Kennedy, to boost his presidential stature, wrote this book called Profiles in wrote. It was totally ghostwritten. He wrote this book called Profiles in Courage, where he detailed various politicians that did amazing things under very stressful circumstances. Inspired by Kennedy, and Kennedy actually gave him this advice. They did like each other before 1960. Richard Nixon should write a book. And so in 1962, Richard Nixon wrote Six Crises, similar in vein to the Shane Dawson book, where he detailed six situations where he was under pressure and he came out of it doing the right thing. So he talked about like the Alger Hiss case. This was what blew him up in Congress, where there was this figure, this member of Congress that was supposedly uh, a Soviet spy. And so that got Richard Nixon famous because he was part of the House of Un-American Activities Committee. This was the same committee that McCarthy abused in the 1950s. And like again, Richard Nixon was being adaptable and trying not to be like, oh, I don't endorse the excesses of this guy. And then he also talked about like steering clear of Latin American protesters in like 1957 in Caracas, Venezuela, and he was talking about his defeat in 1960. Those are like some of the six crises that he was a part of. Now going back to my timeline here, so 1963 to 68, that was like the wilderness period for Richard Nixon. I can't really say that there was a wilderness period for Shane Dawson as well, because Shane Dawson still grew up in stature. He would eventually like blow up in like 2018. So there
Yeah.
wasn't really a comeback for Shane Dawson in the sense that he never really got actually never mind. He did get canceled in 2014. So around the same time as Not Cool, uh the first blackface scandal appeared. Where he would actually
The
have to,
first?
yes, the first one out of two big blackface scandals.
This is, if I do my math correctly, like 6 years post first YouTube blackface thing.
Yes. The earliest video on the big Shane Dawson channel is him apologizing for using blackface back then. Yeah, he was like, I'm sorry. Okay, in that video, Shane Dawson had the audacity to be like, I didn't know what blackface was until somebody told me last week. Even though like
Um,
he was doing levels of racism that of like the censored 11, the band Bugs Bunny. He was like doing pure minstrel, and he was like, I didn't know what blackface was. Bullshit. Bullshit. Anyway, back to so he did this apology. There was like somebody on Twitter, I forget their name, but there was somebody on Twitter that like roasted him. Shane Dawson was like, "Why are you being so mean to me?"
oh, I wonder why. I
Yeah,
wonder why.
you're being so aggressive and hateful towards me. But I'm sorry. I'm sorry I hurt your feelings. That was sort of the vibe. That.
Oh, I'm sorry you feel that way.
Yeah.
Ugh.
I will promise not to do blackface in the future. He did not do blackface in the future. All the blackface was like early truth, not excusing it, by the way, and not even saying that this was like okay at the time. I'm just saying he did stop around 2010, 2011.
Right.
So like there might have been a level of sincerity there. With YouTubers, you never, and especially Shane Dawson, when you get later, you never know. So like
Mhm.
during this period of going back to Nixon, during this period, one of the big things that Nixon did in like the mid 60s. Now he became rich for the first time. He was never really a wealthy man. Believe it or not, members of Congress, they're not all rich.
Oh,
Most controversial take of the evening. So
is it?
so Richard Nixon, he became rich for the first time practicing law in New York. His home state was New York from
Mhm.
like 63 to 68. The, pe- the people of California kicked him around too many times. He left. He became rich. And then he was like and then he actively tried to campaign for Barry Goldwater in 64. He was kind of like, "Oh, why don't we run Richard Nixon again in 64?" This was after the Kennedy assassination. He was going up against Lyndon
Mm.
Johnson, but also Lyndon Johnson was unstoppable in 64. Everybody knew it. Nixon did not run in 64. He campaigned in California, regained some of his stature within the state. Uh California still went to Lyndon Johnson because Barry Goldwater was seen as like this kook who was both against civil rights as well as wanting to nuke Vietnam. Did he actually want to
Right.
do those things? It's mixed. Lyndon Johnson pulled a Richard Nixon and just kind of accused him of a lot of that shit. I mean, the civil rights take was real. So the only states that Barry Goldwater did win were the Deep South, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. I think South Carolina as well. And then
Mm.
he won his home state of Arizona. That's all he won. This was one of the biggest
Right.
landslides by popular vote margin. I believe this is still the biggest landslide in American history. Johnson won like
Dang. Okay.
61% of the vote. But, he gained some credibility back with Republicans. Um, he did some consulting, and later, 1968, he made his grand return to politics. At this time, he kind of switched up his strategy. So, like, again, like in 1960, where he like weighed the calculus of calling Martin Luther King on whether to be on how racist or not racist he should be, he kind of did the same thing with this campaign. So this was a three-way race between Hubert Humphrey, who was the vice president under Johnson, and George Wallace, who was like a you've heard of George Wallace. His
Name
his
sounds
most
familiar,
famous his
yes.
most famous quote was like segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. He was the openly racist governor of Alabama,
Right.
and Nixon pulled the same thing. Where he's like, I'm not an extreme liberal like Hubert Humphrey, and I am neither this extreme racist from Alabama. And so that won him like a lot of states. And he was able to win the election with around 43% of the popular vote. It's like one of the
Dang.
lowest victorious popular vote margins ever. But he got
That's surprising because like if you ran on that, that's surprising to me because like if you ran on that today, no one would vote for you.
yeah.
If you
People
were like, I'm not on either extreme side, I'm the middle. People hate middlemen now. That's really surprising.
Yeah. And so like in 19 it was like something this was like the preface of something called the Southern Strategy. You appeal to the racism of white Southerners. As a Republican, you appeal to the racism of white Southerners as like the liberal wing of the Democratic Party took over, like this pro civil rights wing took over the entire party. You appeal to them, but you don't like openly appeal to them. A Republican strategist named Lee Atwater said it as like back then you could say N word, N word, N word, but you can't say it anymore. You lose. So you say like forced busing, forced desegregation, government overreach, states' rights. That's
Mm,
how you win. And Richard Nixon kind of used that to his advantage, and he ended up winning. But George Wallace won most of the. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Nixon won like southern states like Tennessee, so it wasn't entirely ineffective. Though Hubert Humphrey won
okay.
Texas and Wallace won the rest of the Deep South. But he also Nixon also killed it in the North, which was almost just as which was just as racist as the South, just without the history. Meanwhile, Shane Dawson in
This is the
20
most insane thing ever.
in 2017, Shane Dawson started releasing like these web series confessional documentary style videos. So like one of the first ones was where he was like confronting my mom and confronting my dad, where he was like confronting like his familial trauma. And he was like openly talking to his dad, like, why did you like abuse me when I was younger? Why'd you scream at my mom? Like he went out of his way to like talk about these serious issues, and then he was like, I'm gonna confront. And then he also like made a series where like, he confronted his hater. Have you ever heard of a YouTuber named Bobby Burns?
No.
He was like a moderate big deal back in the day. He was on one of the Cinema Sins channels. I think it was like Music Video Sins or something.
Oh,
And
I was,
he also did like
yeah,
his
I was
own
on
style of
CinemaSins.
vlogging. He kind of reminds me of like Ryan Trahan, if you heard of him.
Yes, I've heard of Ryan
Yeah.
Trahan.
Okay. You're somewhat of a ball knower. I'm understanding it now.
Well, I just like he's one of the more popular ones
um.
now. Like he's up there for now is like one of the
Mm-hmm.
most popular ones on YouTube at the moment.
Yeah. So Shane Dawson started picking up more steam around 2017, 2018, early 2018. He then blew up with two series. One where he collaborated with Jeffree Star. I think this was
Mm.
after Dramageddon 1, so Jeffree Star needed like a makeover, a virtual makeover, or a
You just do that
rehabilitation,
yourself.
so to
Oh,
speak, after like these people are kindred spirits because what led to Jeffree Star's initial cancellation was like accusations of racism, saying the N word. You know about it.
I know about the Jeffree Star stuff, yes.
Okay, so you're well aware. Okay, so like first series he did with Jeffree Star, he's like, oh, this guy's actually kind of cool. He's like moved on. He's matured. Jeffree Star did not mature.
Mm.
We know this, but you gotta play to the crowd. You gotta play to the crowd. And then the other big one that helped him blow up was Tanacon, investigating Tanacon. You've heard of Tanacon, right?
I know about, yes.
Yeah, Tana Mo. I forget how to pronounce her last name. Tana
It's just Mojo.
Mojo. Tana Mojo.
I think they
Um,
just call her Tana Mojo, yeah.
she hosted this like competitor to VidCon. It was very poorly organized. It was crowded out. But Shane Dawson did the docu series where she was actually the victim in all this. She didn't know what was going on, and I believe that was kind of true, if I'm not mistaken. Like that was like one of the documentaries where he was vindicated, and so these types of videos blew Shane Dawson up more than anything else. He was getting attention. He was being finally being seen as a serious filmmaker. Meanwhile, Richard
Yes.
Nixon, his first term, extremely consequential. So like trying to end the Vietnam War, trying to this was the Apollo 11 landing, right? Woodstock.
Oh,
This is the
okay, yeah.
late 60s. This is crazy, crazy stuff going on. The EPA, I believe during his first term as well, he also went to China, soften relations with them as well. And I believe some point in his first term, he also signed an agreement with the Soviet Union to like loosen nuclear arms. It was a very eventful term. Richard Nixon was
Right.
starting to pick up in the polls. However, by 1971, by mid 1971, 1 year before the election, Richard Nixon was in a crisis. The war was going on; it was continuing. We were languishing in the Vietnam War. Um, Protesters, the Kent State Massacre happened. Also, the economy, mostly because of the war, was not doing very well. And so Nixon, wanting to secure re-election in 1972, picked out some of the leading Democratic contenders during this period. The three in like early to mid 1971 were Senator Ted Kennedy, so the younger brother of the two Kennedys, Senator from Washington Edmund Muskie, and then the third wild card option was George Wallace. He was back. Richard Nixon, concerned about his poll numbers, was like, if Wallace runs as a third party, I'm fucked. I'm not going to win in 72. He's going to win in the South. I can't play up moderate anymore. Times are changing. And so what Nixon
Yeah.
did, so there was strategies. This was the beginning of like Nixon's big paranoia. Everybody was out to get him. Jewish people were out to get him. Black people were out to get him. The Ivy League liberals were out to get him, as always. And so Nixon set up this committee from the CIA called the Committee to Re-elect the President. And they try to lunge up any dirt they could find. Ted Kennedy was easy. He killed a woman in Chappaquiddick in like the late 60s. You didn't hear about this? You didn't
Oh,
hear about Chappaquiddick?
no.
Okay, so divert
Detour
tangent
time.
time. In like the late
This is a true
60s,
crime podcast now.
yeah, in like the late 1960s, Ted Kennedy was like, he was a senator, US senator at the time. He was driving along in Massachusetts with a young woman, and then he crashed his car. I think he was like drunk, or he was like drunk or something. He was driving drunk. He
Mm.
crashed his car into the water, into Chappaquiddick, and the young woman drowned in the car. But instead of helping her, Ted Kennedy went back to his house, talked with some lawyers, and then went to sleep, and then came back, found that she was dead, then talked to some lawyers again, and then called 911.
Oh, okay.
And then he served as a senator for 40 more years.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so you can understand why Nixon might dislike the Kennedys a little bit. They could get away with
Maybe.
anything. But
Hmm.
Ted Kennedy could not run for president. You just unveil more dirt about that, it's over. With George Wallace, Nixon set up a primary challenge in the 1970 Alabama gubernatorial election. He set up a primary challenge against George Wallace that forced George Wallace to be extra racist in order to win the ideological primary voters. Like, I think there was like an ad where it was like a girl surrounded by like six black men, and it's like, this could be Alabama if this guy won. Playing off of that
Oh,
infamous racial fetish. And so by 1971, Wallace decided, I'm going to just run as a mainstream Democrat. He actually came in second in the primaries. Meanwhile, Shane Dawson, 2018, he was becoming bigger and bigger with each new docu-series. The biggest one, and the one that got me into him, was The Mind of Jake Paul, where Shane Dawson and another like psychologist lady, they were like, is this Jake Paul figure, the leader of Team 10, is he a sociopath? That was the big question. Did you not have you not watched them? It was like that docu
no, I've
series.
never.
It was massive, like low taper fade. It was massive. 50 million views a pop. 50.
All right.
Investigating whether Jake Paul, and then they interviewed Jake Paul. This is where the Shane Dawson is an empath came from. Jake Paul, he's this sociopathic figure who doesn't care about anybody. He's a he's a monster. He like annoys his neighbors. He makes bad music. He
Oh no,
betrays his business partners. Meanwhile, I, Shane Dawson, am the caring empath. I felt all
I
of Tana
see.
Mojo's pain when I was interviewing her during TanaCon. I felt all of Jeffree Star's pain when I was trying to cover up that he said the N word. I felt that pain. I related to Jeffree Star. I am an empath. You can understand my
Yes.
at you. I bet you can understand my attitude towards this.
Uh-huh.
And then, and then he interviewed Jake Paul, and then it was revealed that he wasn't this crazy like villain sociopath. In fact, they were quite similar. Jake Paul, believe it or not, liked his girlfriend. Yeah,
Oh, what?
yeah. Not only did he like his girlfriend, he like regretted some of the things he did during his career.
No way. Who would have
Yeah, and
thought?
so guess what? Jake Paul, not a murderous sociopath. And eighth grade me, ate that shit up. I loved it. I waited. So like I was part of like I was like a football manager in eighth grade because I wanted to like run laps around the football fields. And every time I run laps around the football fields, I like went on my phone and watched like whatever YouTube video was on my feed.
Mhm.
And like the mind to Jake Paul was always the one that I was waiting for. I even like took screenshots of like, oh, I viewed this before it hit 1 million views because I'm like cool
Oh,
like
it was an
that.
accomplishment to you.
Yeah, it was an accomplishment to me. I was what was the what are Shane Dawson fans called? Like Dawson daddies or something?
Yars.
I'm not calling myself that, yars.
Yars.
But I ate it up, hook, line, and sinker. Because, you know, in 2017, 2018, everybody hated Jake Paul. Everybody hated the Paul brothers.
Yeah.
This was the same year that, like, Logan Paul filmed a dead body for content.
Yeah, and this is the
People,
same time I was eating up Bizarre on Disney Channel, so obviously I didn't know what was going
yeah.
on.
You saw a young Olivia Rodrigo, though.
Well, I did. I love Bizarre Park. That was my shit.
And Jake Paul was on that show as well, right?
But yeah, that's what I'm saying. I didn't know all this was going on because I
Oh,
was watching his Disney Channel
I'm
show.
watching.
I wasn't on this side of
You
YouTube.
were on the Disney Channel flow. 5 mil on
I
YouTube in six
was.
months ain't never done before. Yeah, and then going back, and then okay, now before we go back to Richard Nixon, I still want to talk about Shane Dawson. After that series was conspiracy theories with Shane Dawson. Again,
Hmm.
huge, 50 million views. I think he did like the mattress sperm conspiracy theory in that one. I didn't like that series
Okay.
as much. He didn't cover the dude I hated, which was Jake Paul. I don't care about conspiracy theories. I care about like calling Jake Paul a sociopath. That's all I cared about. And so
Yeah.
I didn't watch that one. Well, I didn't watch the second one. But meanwhile, in the background, there was a young up and coming YouTuber that was among like Emma Chamberlain and the Dolan twins. His name, and we all know him. We all have feelings towards him, good or bad. His name was James Charles. He was a rising
Yes.
star, millions of views. Now, it might seem like, oh, he just does makeup tutorials. Who cares about that? But
Who cares about makeup?
yeah, who cares about makeup YouTubers? You yeah. And so trying to be I'm masking my pauses as dramatic.
All
And
right.
so but you know, as we all know, Shane Dawson was friends with one Jeffree Star, who was going to be a direct competitor of James Charles. He was eating up the market share. Every time James Charles said "Hi, sister," Jeffree Star fan would convert over, and so there became a secret campaign in order to bring this man down. Supposedly, this is a he said she said situation. Meanwhile, Richard Nixon, the Dirty Tricks campaign, he was pulling out all the stops that he did in 46, in 48, in 50. Find any dirt you can, make them look awful, and make Richard Nixon seem like the candidate for the average person, the moderate. And so, like, during the 72 campaign at the beginning, he made sure that he took out all of his opponents. We talked about George Wallace and we talked about and no, we did. We talked about George Wallace and we talked about Ted Kennedy. And then the front runner at that point was a guy named Edmund Muskie. He was leading ahead of Nixon. And so what he did, he organized an organization called the Committee to Re-elect the President. It's part of the CIA. We mentioned this. And they found
Mhm.
various dirt on him. that may or may not have been true. They did all kinds of things to disturb the Muskie campaign. They hired a naked woman to be like, "I love you, Edmund Muskie," to be like, "Oh, he has sexual affairs."
Ooh,
That used to cancel campaigns back then. And then
yeah.
that they ordered huge amounts of pizza to his office to be like, "Oh, slush fund." One of the biggest
I
ones
thought
though.
you were gonna be like, "Oh, he's fat."
Yeah, and one of the
That's
biggest
where
one,
that was
the
going.
one that ended it. This was during the New Hampshire primary. This is like one of the first primaries of the Democratic campaign. Was that Edmund Muskie called the French Canadians Canucks, and Edmund Muskie was like, I did not call them
Is that like
Canucks." That was
okay?
like
So
the.
for I know what that means, but for the
Mhm.
listeners who may not know the weight that word carries, what does that what explain?
Canucks are what I call our villains to the north of
Okay,
Canada.
thank you. That'll be very helpful to the listeners that need
Yeah,
the
especially
explanation
our
on that.
Canadian viewers.
Yes, all two of them.
All none of them at this point. But anyways, what if anti-Canadian bias gets me canceled? What if that ends the show before it even starts?
I don't know.
Ryan
We'll
Little,
have to see.
anti-Canadian bigot.
Just have to post this and then we'll see
Anyways,
what
yeah.
happens.
Anyways, that derailed his campaign. And then in May of 1971, or I think it was 72, one of the most infamous things happened where like a branch of Creep decided we're gonna go. Oh, it was Creep, and there was also the plumbers, which found the various dirt on each of the Democratic candidates. But in May of 1972, four people that went rogue of the Creep campaign broke into the Watergate Hotel to try to find dirt in the DNC. And that is what began the long fall of Richard Nixon. Now, going back to
Mhm.
Shane Dawson, after the conspiracy theory series was a hit, Shane Dawson did another series with Jeffree Star, and this is where Shane Dawson formally entered the beauty community. He put on makeup. It came to mixed
I just have
reception.
to picture the Snapchat meme of him with like the shitty little eyeliner wing on. He's like, I think I'm getting better. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I think so. I think so.
Okay.
And then I think it was like May of 2019, a makeup influencer named Tati Westbrook releases a video called "Bye Sister," which accused this up and coming YouTuber, James Charles, of various crimes against humanity. One, he advertised a competing gummy brand on his Instagram story. Horrible.
So
Betrayal.
bad.
A two brute? Because Toddy Westbrook had her own vitamin gummy brand as well, right?
Hmm.
That might have been the reason she made the video. But also, the big accusation was that James Charles came on to straight men. He kept.
Sucking dick and cock.
He was at my birthday dinner. He was sucking.
Like time and place.
Yeah. Horrible, horrible. And then so the James Charles as a predator started popping off. James Charles lost a million subscribers in one day. He posted a video where he's like,
Mhm.
I'm sorry, I didn't know that the gummy brand would be such a big deal. Not knowing that the big deal was that he supposedly hit on straight men. But later, the next
Mhm.
week, after he lost millions of subscribers, James Charles released a video called "No More Lies," where he detailed that no,
Yes.
actually, I did not hit on straight men. And there was like that one waiter guy who was like, "Yeah, I'm bi curious, but also like shit. Also, James Charles is a terrible kisser." He had to sneak in a fun fact in there as well.
And see, all this was happening while I was in eighth grade.
Mm-hmm.
This was my eighth grade, was when No More Lies dropped.
Actually,
So,
if in 2019, because I was in eighth grade in 2019, would it have been sixth grade? I don't.
did it have been? I could have sworn there were, I don't know. James Charles has so many controversies. There was one during COVID when I was in eighth grade. I remember this.
Yes. Eventually, but it was proven that not Shane Dawson, that James Charles was not a predator of straight men. Which, in retrospect, by the way,
Of straight men.
even though like his accusers were mostly queer anyway, like Jeffree Star and Shane Dawson, that is like the most classic homophobic attack you can make on a gay creator is that they hit on straight men. Like that's the accusation people
Mhm.
make when they do the panic defense, where they kill a gay guy and be like, "Oh well, he was
Yeah.
coming on to me. He was coming on to me," and so like that smacks to me of like exploiting like homophobic tropes, even in a supposedly very queer affirming community. You know what I mean?
I've actually never thought about it like that before, but that's a good point.
Yeah.
I
So
mean, like I've dealt with that before too, where
mm-hmm.
guys are like, "Oh my God, like so why are you hitting on me?" And I'm like, "I'm standing here like drinking my chocolate milk box at lunch.
mm-hmm.
Like what the fuck do you want?"
Why are you hitting on me, Parker?
I've dealt with that before, so like yeah, as if you didn't come to me for this idea.
But anyway, that was like one of my observations when I came up with this. But Shane Dawson at the time was not accused of like orchestrating this. His hands were clean at the
Mhm.
time. Likewise, Richard Nixon's hands were clean when like the four people broke into the Watergate Hotel. Nobody accused Nixon of anything. Yeah, Nixon was he was a negative campaigner, sure, but like he wouldn't do anything illegal. This was just like a minor break
Mhm.
in of like crazy partisans. And so they offered that story up to like the lowest ranking Washington Post reporters. It was like Woodard and Bernstein. Who even knows who they are? Irrelevant.
Yeah. Well,
They didn't do anything spectacular with this case. It was forgotten within a few months. And then the Democrats picked in Miami in 1972. They picked populist South Dakota Senator George McGovern. Now, George McGovern, according to the Nixon
very
campaign,
apt
and
name.
not until you see the results of the election, George McGovern was accused of three things: amnesty, abortion, and I think it was like socialism or something. He was seen as like this far left, crazy abortion fanatic candidate. And like to the point where like even other Democrats, more conservative Democrats, campaigned for Nixon. Like John Connolly, who was like a governor of Texas, popular governor of Texas. He was right next to JFK when he was assassinated. He formed Democrats for Nixon. One of the big things that ended the McGovern campaign was that he picked this vice president, this senator named Thomas Eagleton of Missouri, to be his vice. And then, coincidentally, news stories came out that showed that Eagleton suffered from depression and used electroshock therapy in order to treat it. Why would George
Okay.
McGovern? We should question the George McGovern campaign when they picked a mentally ill person, a crazy person, a lunatic to be the vice president. What would happen if McGovern was not able to run to be president? We would get him to be vice president. And after these accusations, McGovern, being a nice guy, was like, I support him 1000%. And then he dropped him a couple weeks later because the controversy was too big. That, more than anything, kind of derailed the McGovern campaign. And so,
Mhm.
like Shane Dawson in 2019 with his second Jeffree Star series, hit the peak of his fame in like 2019, 2020. Richard Nixon reached his peak in November 1972 when he won over 60% of the votes in 49 states in the 1972 election. The only other president that won this many states was Ronald Reagan in '84. This was a big deal. However, things start tumbling down as these controversies start to, they start to pick up. And
Yeah.
so later, after James Charles successfully defended himself against the accusations that straight men were coming on to him, or he was coming on to straight men, um, Jeffree Star had this memo, this supposed smoking gun voice memo that proved once and for all that James Charles was a predator. I
Hmm.
think we still have yet to hear it.
I think it got leaked
We did
because
it?
this is familiar to me, and I think it did.
No. Well,
Fact checker, can we get a confirm on this?
we're not rich enough for fact checkers yet. We don't have a Jamie.
You don't. We'll get one. We'll get
We'll
one.
get one manifesting success. But yeah,
I'll bring my sister in here next time and she could be a fact checker.
hell yes, this is the way to go. Anyway, Jeffree Star had this voice memo, and he was collabing with Shane Dawson, and eventually, I think the word got around that Shane Dawson might have been responsible for this kind of thing. And so Shane Dawson sent out an infamous tweet that said, is James Charles the devil? No. But does James Charles deserve a slice of humble pie the size of the fucking Empire State Building? Yes. And that caused the beauty community to stir. And
Mhm.
there was fact check. You're part of the beauty community. I've seen some of your comments on your TikTok where they're like hating on your makeup. This is a toxic
Mhm.
community. That Shane Dawson was right about one thing in this situation. The beauty community is toxic, but going back to so like there started to be research on Shane Dawson, and by then it was starting to be the summer of 2020. This was peak. This was after like George Floyd was murdered by Derek Chauvin. We were reaching like
Mhm.
peak Black Lives Matter wokeness here. And with this history that Shane Dawson had of blackface, of constant blackface in the early years of his career, it started to catch up with him. Likewise, in 1971, Richard Nixon wiretapped the White House because his paranoia was getting so bad, alongside Creep. And he also was like very obstructive when it came to the release of the Pentagon Papers, when his advisor Henry Kissinger was like, you can't let this leak, otherwise it'll undermine like the president's foreign policy agenda. And so like it's the story was starting to pick up. The Washington Post tried to call, they got this leak named Deep Throat, crazy name by the way, to feed them that, oh yeah, these people that broke into Watergate, they were with the president, they were involved with the president in some way. Now
Yeah, I have a.
they did genuinely go rogue. However, Richard Nixon and his paranoia was like, I'm not. We got to make sure this story gets smothered before it goes anywhere.
Mhm. I have such a vivid memory because in junior year A push, we were talking about we were talking about the Watergate scandal. We got to that point in the year, and I had just made a TikTok about like doing, and I wanted to try this like really fun thing where I was doing like history bullshit while doing my
Mm.
makeup. And the first one was the Watergate scandal. And so I did all this research and I went into class the next day and I was like, "Hey, Miss Burton, why didn't you tell us that the leaker's name was Deep Throat?" And she was like, "Because you know exactly why I'm not fucking doing that." And I'm like,
Did she say fucking?
"No, she didn't, but
Ah,
she meant it."
yeah.
You
You
could
know
tell she
what?
was one of those teachers. She was one of those teachers that let it all air out.
Mm.
Miss Burton's not gonna watch this.
Same
Please
with
don't watch
Woodard
this.
and Bernstein as they let all this started to air out. It got a hold of Congress, which was the House was still controlled by Democrats at that time. So anything that undermined the Republican president, they started to do probes. Richard Nixon kept trying to put the fire out, right? Going back to, and it just started going out of control, right? They kept pressuring him. You got to release the Nixon tapes. You got to release the Nixon tapes. And Richard Nixon was like, I'm not doing that. I have executive authority.
Why?
Going back to Shane Dawson, right? The similarity between the two scandals is that the event that spurred them was not the reason they got canceled. Right? Shane Dawson did not get canceled because he said that James Charles needed a slice of humble pie.
Yeah, no.
He got canceled because he said that the beauty community got pissed and they researched all the horrible things that Shane Dawson had said and done in the decade leading up
Hmm.
to this event. It's likewise with Richard Nixon. People didn't care that people broke into the Watergate Hotel. They started to care that Richard Nixon seemed to care so much. Right?
Hmm.
The unscriptedness of the show started to leak out. And
No
so
worries.
and
It's
so
fine. I think podcasts should be unscripted.
all this as all this was spurring out of control, Shane Dawson released a video called Taking Accountability, where he was
Yep.
like, I am sorry I made pedophilic comments about my cousin, my 12-year-old cousin, on tape. I'm sorry again. I'm sorry that I did blackface again.
Is this where the I, Shane Ya, did not fuck my cat? Is that where this comes
No,
from?
no, 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 no. This was after.
Okay.
Maybe. But yeah, Shay, he was trying to like do damage control. He got away with it many times before, but this time, this was again. This is peak woke 2020. He ain't getting away with it that easy. No, there was an early positive response to the taking accountability video. Likewise, there was a positive response to Nixon being like, "I'm open to this investigation if they could prove that I'm not a crook." Well, I'm not a crook,
Yeah.
right? He's not a crook. Even as he kept trying to cover it up and impeding the investigation at
Hmm.
every turn. Right after Shane Dawson made his video trying to address like the controversies that was spinning around him. There was another video that got leaked right after of Shane Dawson pretending to whack off to a poster of Willow Smith when she was 11 years
Yep.
old.
I know about that.
Yeah. Then there was other
I
clips,
know
the
about that.
the Shane Dawson fucking his cat clip that came out.
Hmm.
And so it just kept tumbling down, tumbling down. Richard Nixon, as he kept covering it up, he fired his attorney general. He fired a lot of his staff that were cooperating. It was the Saturday Night Massacre, as it became to be called, which spurred Congress to try
Yes.
to impeach him. Nixon went all the way to the Supreme Court to stop the Nixon tapes from releasing. Eventually, the Supreme Court was like, "You, dude, you can't use executive authority to claim to block a subpoena just because you're the president." And so the Nixon tapes
Yeah.
got released, and it showed that Nixon didn't know about Watergate right after it. Even though he didn't authorize it, he did know that it happened right afterwards. Public opinion, it was turning against Nixon. He was becoming extremely unpopular. Maybe some senators will block him from being impeached. Likewise, Shane Dawson, his career collapsing. And then Toddy Westbrook trying to capture all this drama was like, I'm gonna post a video, breaking my silence. I think it was called.
Yep.
And she was
It
like,
was.
Shane Dawson and Jeffree Star manipulated me into believing that James Charles was a predator against straight men. And then I
And then there's the
realized,
clip of Shane Dawson on Instagram Live going,
yeah,
you're
you're
crying.
fake crying. You message drama channels.
Yeah.
So like as Toddy Westbrook released, yes, Shane Dawson released that video of like, you message drama channels. And then his husband Ryland was like, you gotta shut up, dude. His career collapsing, and finally, Richard Nixon suffered the same fate. The smoking gun tape released. His involvement in Watergate proven. His cover-ups and lies exposed. He had no more support in Congress. And so, on August, I think it was like August 14th or August 9th, he formally resigned the presidency. He went up to Air Force One, like, did the victory
Yep. Yep.
sign, and he left absolutely despised by the YouTube community. I mean
Richard
the
Nixon.
political community. And then
Yeah, people on YouTube hated Richard Nixon in
they
1970s.
did. They absolutely despised him. And then his successor, Vice President Gerald Ford, that wasn't his pick for vice president. It was Spiro Agnew, but he committed tax fraud, so he resigned as well. So Gerald Ford, friend of Richard Nixon, he pardoned him, which pretty much ended his political career. And
Yeah.
Democrats took large wins in 74. They won the presidency in 76. It wouldn't be until Ronald Reagan and his revolution when Republicans finally won again. In order to regain his credibility, Richard Nixon went on tape and was like, he went on, I think it was like Frost or something. It was like a British reporter, and he was talking about like, well, it's legal when you're the president. But he made back his money, right? He became absolutely poor when the legal fees just amounted to just absolute craziness. And so, and then Shane Dawson decided, I'm not going to post on my main channel as much anymore. I'm just going to post conspiracy theories on my podcast channel, where he routinely gets 800,000 views. Now, this is a far cry from the 50 million he got during the peak of his career,
Hmm.
but he's still going, right? And then likewise, Richard Nixon. But you can't fully cancel. There are very few instances where somebody's like fully eliminated from the public sphere. So like Richard
Yeah.
Nixon gained his money back. He eventually gained the respect back of the Republican Party, became an advisor to many of his successors. He wrote his memoirs. And to this day, like the Richard Nixon Foundation is trying to show that yes, we're trying to rehabilitate his image of like this was actually a liberal champion of a president. The Clean Air Act, the EPA. Richard Nixon was a leading supporter of Title IX. Not Shane Dawson. Richard Nixon was a lot of things. Misogynist was not one of them. He was a genuine supporter of Title IX, and uh, female staffers loved working with Richard Nixon because he was one of the few people in Washington that wouldn't say or do horrible things to them.
Yeah.
And then likewise, what we got with Shane. I don't think Shane Dawson has received the same rehabilitative image that Nixon has gotten. Because I think when it comes to Nixon, he's like brilliant, and he did do like good things for this country. Not to be too political or partisan or whatever. Like he eased relations with China. Um, you know, I talked about the EPA. He also helped desegregate the schools eventually through this policy of new federalism, which allowed local communities to organize and find ways of desegregating schools. And so, like, there is a genuine complicated legacy with Richard Nixon. He was simultaneously brilliant and a great politician, but also an asshole and insecure and vindictive and paranoid and at times authoritarian as well. And I think if people look back retrospectively on Shane Dawson, I think we can, aside from the horrible things that he made his sketches about and the horrible things that he said, right? And, he was a hard worker. He was a pioneer of YouTube. He was adaptive, and he was charismatic enough to make flawed premises of documentaries, and he made them work. It takes a skilled man to rehabilitate the image of both Jake Paul and Jeffree Star. I'm just saying.
It does. It does.
But, time will only tell if people see Shane Yaw as the Richard Nixon of YouTube.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're the start. You're the
Yeah,
one.
I'm the one
You can
making
pioneer
this. I
this.
can. Yeah. And so
All right. Okay.
that was why Shane Dawson is the Richard Nixon of YouTube. I said the title, therefore we are concluding the
Course
first
over. We're
episode
done.
of the
Title
Let's
drop.
Trade Places podcast.
Yes. Okay. But before we end, I want to make sure I have. I want to okay. I want to make sure that I prove to you that I've actually learned something. So, so we have Shane Dawson and Richard Nixon, both from Southern California, and
Mm-hmm.
they both were poor, and they were both kind of use that to get their start in their
Mm-hmm.
respective fields. And then so then we got boom, blackface, all this stuff, and we apologize for it. And then Richard Nixon, we this is a timeline by the way. Like
Mm-hmm.
use the bars on the top of my bed as a
Yeah.
timeline. So we're here. We're here. Black this is really uncomfortable. I don't know why I made myself do this. So we got blackface, and then we got Richard Nixon's first little dirty tricks thing,
Mm-hmm.
scandals, blah 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 blah. But then they keep growing, they keep growing. Shane Dawson gets his start in documentary filmmaking, and Richard Nixon starts his political career. And so now they're boom, 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 boom. Oh my God, they're so
Mm-hmm.
cool, they're so great. And then Watergate happens, and
Mm-hmm.
Dramageddon happens,
Mm-hmm.
and then okay, am I correct?
More or less. I also like have a lot of details that I missed just because I didn't take too many notes. Unfortunately, we will get more
That's all
professional
right.
as time goes on. This is
Uh-huh.
not supposed to be a definitive history of both Nixon and Shane Dawson.
Yeah, we're not Hank Green.
There are like 1,000 videos about Dramageddon. Likewise, there are 1,000 books about Watergate.
Mm-hmm.
I watched like
Go
a
watch my
dozen of
TikTok
them.
video about Watergate, guys. I don't think it's up anymore. I think
Watch
I deleted
Parker.
it.
Ah, man, coward,
I don't think it's
coward.
up anymore. Yeah.
But
No, it's
yeah,
because I got information wrong. I didn't do much
the
research and I was
final similarity
talking
that I will make is that
falsehoods.
they were taken down by two of the worst kinds of people imaginable: makeup
Uh-huh.
influencers and journalists. Yeah.
Okay, and so with that, I'm leaving the podcast after episode one.
Yeah.
No more. Go find yourself a new co-host, Ryan.
All right. In our next episode, Parker is going
Oh
to be
god.
talking about was it Tyra Banks?
Tyra Banks' 2011 dystopian YA novel Model Land.
Oh,
I
jeez.
am so excited. I'm gonna have like flashcards. I'm so excited because it's a whirlwind, dude. This is
All
oh
right. Should
please
we obnoxiously
just
shout "Let's trade places" at the end of every episode?
yes, let's trade places.
Yeah. All right. Hope y'all had a good time. Subscribe, follow, like, do whatever is possible. We're now shilling our
Retweet,
channel.
put it on
Retweet,
Substack.
repost, praise us, send fan art. If we
Send
open
me
a
money. My Cash App is.
if we make a Patreon, donate to that, become a member today.
Mhm.
And that was episode 1 of Let's Trade Places. All right.
Yes, sir.